You are listening to UpTalk with Sean Conahan. The gloves are off, and it's time to have a chat.
Hello, people, and welcome back to UpTalk Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Really appreciate you being here. As always, the subject matter of this podcast could be triggering to some listeners. So, make sure you get yourself in a good headspace, good frame of mind, to listen to the podcast so you can get the most out of it. Okay? All right. You can find the podcast exclusively at the Mental Health News Radio Network. Check them out at the mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com. It's a wicked online mental health network that has over 30 mental health shows that span a broad range of mental health issues. So certainly check them out. They've been really good to me. Appreciate being there. You can also find the podcast anywhere you normally get your podcasts. If that's not the case, email me at uptalkpodcast@gmail.com and I'll fix that right away. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. On any one of those, just search UpTalk Podcast. Check them out. Let me know what you think. Really appreciate it. However you listen, please take the time to leave some feedback, leave a rating, subscribe. Those all make a huge difference in how visible the podcast is, so I appreciate you doing that. If you are an organization that would like to tap into the 6.7 million listener audience of the Mental Health News Radio Network, you can do that by sponsoring the podcast. We're looking for sponsors. You can email me at uptalkpodcast@gmail.com and we'll get that started. Would love to have you on board. We're going to start this episode off with a little bit of sad news. On February 28th, we lost a true leader in this country for first responder mental health advocacy. I was blessed and lucky to meet this man in October of last year in Edmonton at Daniel Sundall's Peer Resiliency Symposium. And on February 28th, as I said, he died by suicide. So this episode is dedicated to Chris Siddons. Just a little bit about him in case you don't know. He was formerly of Plymouth, England, started his career in the military at age 16 as a guardsman in Her Majesty's Coldstream Guards. He served 10 years in the military with various postings such as 2 tours in Northern Ireland at the height of unrest, in Kenya, Germany, Hong Kong, as well as the front lines of the Gulf War. Chris received an honorable discharge in 1996 and decided to start a new chapter, which brought him to Canada in 2005. His diagnosis of PTSD and major depression in 2014 brought many struggles to his life, and this continued until 2016, at which time he had the opportunity to become one of the founding members of osi-can. osi-can is a support initiative for veterans, community first responders dealing with an operational stress injury / PTSD. Working as a provincial coordinator, peer support worker, led Chris to southern Saskatchewan, where he settled into a career with EMS serving rural areas. This news shocked a lot of people, but hammers the point home that looks can be deceiving from the outside. They really can. And is a reminder to please check on your loved ones consistently, because you never know. I'm not saying this, doing this would have averted Chris's decision, but it's a reminder to all of us to please do that. This news rocked me, as well as many others, really hard. The last week has been hard. It threw me off my routine totally. Didn't meditate for like 5 days. Didn't do anything that I should have been doing. Was just sort of in a funk. This was a special human being. Gentle giant. If anybody had the pleasure of meeting Chris, you know exactly what I mean. So again, this episode is dedicated to Chris in celebration of his life and career. Rest easy, brother, and we'll take it from here. I think I want to do more of this, and what I mean by that is I would like to dedicate episodes to fallen first responders. So if you have a first responder in your life that you have lost, please email me at uptalkpodcast@gmail.com with a short bio and a picture that you would like me to use as part of the cover for the episode. I'd really like to do that, do my part to bring faces and names to the forefront and to celebrate their life and career. I think I would like to do that. So help me out if you would, and if you would like me to do that, like I say, please email me. So, hashtag own your growth. Up to about 6 days ago, I was doing really well. Have been meditating every day. Has made a huge difference for me. So I'm going to give it a little bit more time to get back on track with meditation, and then gradually I'm going to add some yoga next. And I'll give you an update on that in a later episode. Please let me know what you do to own your growth. You can, if you don't want to make it public, you can email me. I've said the email many times so far in this intro. So email me. Let me know what you do to own your growth. If you don't mind making it public, use any of the social media platforms that I mentioned earlier. Tag UpTalk Podcast and use the hashtag #OwnYourGrowth. And let us know what you do. Now, if you're really keen, post a video. Anybody that posts a video, I'm going to mention them on the podcast and let everybody know what they do. All right, so that would be great. Our guest this episode is a returning guest, clinical psychologist. Had an awesome episode last season. She joins us again to help me figure out just what the hell is post-traumatic growth. I ask lots of questions. It was an awesome chat. I have a much better understanding of post-traumatic growth now. Buckle up and welcome back Dr. Megan McElheran.
It was a dark and stormy night, nor'easter rolling in.
Welcome back to the podcast, Megan. It's really cool to have you back on.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate being invited back.
Oh, absolutely. I have to tell you that this episode in particular with you on this subject was requested by Teresa Coulter.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. She texted me and said, I need you to have Megan back on and you need to talk about post-traumatic growth. And I went, okay.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. Well, Teresa, holy cow.
I usually do what she says. So,
yeah, you should. That's probably smart.
Pretty much. And as I was telling you earlier, this goes to our theme this year, which is own your growth. And also, I should say, for people that are wondering more about you and your background, they need to go back and listen to the first episode of, actually was the last episode of last season. You should catch up. If you haven't listened to that one yet, go back, listen to that one first, and then jump to this one. So everybody should know who you are, and if they don't, well, shame on them, so they go back and listen, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So I wanted to have you on to talk about post-traumatic growth, because, again, it ties into the theme of this year.
Yeah.
And my personal feeling is that post-traumatic growth is, like I said, one of these like unicorn terms, kind of like mindfulness.
Yeah. That
people sort of throw out there all the time. And I don't know if a whole lot of people, including myself, really know what it means.
Sure.
If you don't mind, I'm going to give you an analogy of how my brain wraps around post-traumatic growth, okay?
Love it, yeah.
So and here's how I look at this whole thing of post-traumatic stress disorder, and then post-traumatic growth. I liken it to slip and falls. So I liken it to slip and falls in so much that if you walk over uneven ground, so uneven ground equals traumatic event.
Okay.
So you're walking on uneven ground, and every once in a while when doing that, you slip.
Okay.
And that's normal.
Yeah.
And most of the time, you may even stumble, but most of the time your body catches you. Like your equilibrium, your balance will catch you before you actually fall all the way down or hurt yourself.
Yeah.
So I liken that to post-traumatic stress. You stumble, it's normal. Most of the time your body kicks in and saves you before you hurt yourself.
Yeah.
But every once in a while you fall and you get injured. You not only fall, and like most times we can get right back up not injured, but sometimes you fall and get injured and you can't get back up. And to me, that's post-traumatic stress disorder, when your body wasn't able to catch you.
Yeah, I was overwhelmed by what it faced, sure.
Right. Too big of a fall.
Yeah.
So, and then the act of healing that injury and getting back up to your feet is post-traumatic growth. That's kind of like how I see it.
Yeah. I can get on board with that. I mean, sometimes, like an analogy I might use is, we can all get bruises and things like that. Sometimes we can break a bone. So, the natural wear and tear of life might be the bruises and bumps that we get as we go along. I tend to run into things fairly regularly, so I have lots of bruises all over the place.
Yeah.
If we have that slip and fall and we break a bone, right, then that could be equated to the injury part of it and the PTSI that we've been talking about.
Right.
Post-traumatic growth can be this idea that, when a bone stitches back together, it sometimes for a period of time can actually be stronger at the break site than it was before it was hurt.
Right.
And so there's kind of an equivalent process with post-traumatic growth, which is you don't get away from the injury, but there can be things that happen in the process of healing that actually can help people be even stronger on the other side of things.
Totally. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm going to hand this show over to you. It's now the Megan show.
Oh, God, that's a scary idea. I like it.
Do this. And I want you just to start with what is post-traumatic growth and lead us into it, because I know this is a topic that's near and dear to you. So
yeah, it really is. And I was really honored that you wanted me to come on and talk about this, because honestly, I didn't know that it was called post-traumatic growth at the time. But this experience of post-traumatic growth is exactly what sort of drove me into this profession, and particularly in the PTSD trauma line of things in the first place, right? So okay. I told you that story about kind of where I got going with all of this was working with young girls who had been involved in prostitution in some way, who were trying to kind of get their lives back together. And to me, I had this qualitative, real life sort of experience of post-traumatic growth without knowing that that's what I was witnessing, right? Mm. Which is, it's not about people not experiencing the adversities and the traumas that life brings along, but there's something in the way in which people have this, frankly, oftentimes very natural process of trying to heal and trying to recover, that in that process, and when they get to a different place related to the traumas they face, they can actually look back and say, I wish I hadn't gone through the thing, because why would I want to suffer? But having gone through it and having sort of gone through this process of recovering, I've learned something about myself, or I've learned something about the world or my place in it that I didn't know before I went through it.
Right.
And to me, I have been compelled by that idea, for the last 20 years at a minimum, right? And I see this in action all the time. So, I've studied this. I was telling you, getting ready for this, I wrote my dissertation on an area of post-traumatic growth. So, I've studied this, and I look at the research and the conceptual model, but I see this in real life all the time, right? Where people are coming to a place of understanding things about themselves and what matters to them in their life, that they needed the adversity and they needed the process of recovery to help them come to that place.
Right.
Right. So I don't know if that speaks to your experience, because I know you have some familiarity with this.
Yeah, it does. And I think, there's a point where you need to stop fighting the process, stop trying to figure out why this happened to you, stop wasting energy on those things because that's not going to get you anywhere, and accept the fact that you are where you are.
Yeah.
Lean in to the process, and I think only then, like, will you start to see some moving back up, and maybe, like, I don't know, for us as, like, for first responders, for me, especially as for paramedics, we're very protocol driven. So, evidence-based protocol. So the first question that I would have about post-traumatic growth is, how do you quantify it? How do you know you're in it?
Sure. Well, I mean, so, we have to credit, there's two researchers out of the University of North Carolina in Charlotte who developed this framework, right? Their names are Tedeschi and Calhoun.
Okay.
And they proposed that post-traumatic growth is evidenced by kind of 5 predictable ways that people will start to talk about the ways they've been changed by the process of healing and recovery they've gone through. So, we really have to kind of tip our hat to them, because they really started this conversation, and they really did try to quantify and actually created an inventory that we can give people to keep track of these things. And they've done some really, really important work. So for them, the first thing that you start to see is that, through the struggle of recovery, right, through the process of trying to heal, people start to be aware of, there may be opportunities or things that I didn't even know that I should consider that, through this process I've learned about, right? A real common one is, and this fits for you in the paramedic work, right? A lot of paramedics I work with come in and will talk to me like, I now have a totally different appreciation for the people that I'm maybe picking up off the street, and particularly those folks struggling with addiction or things like that. And a couple of people in particular have said, like, I now look at that struggle through a totally different lens, and I see this desire and have this drive to help in a different kind of a way, right? That I couldn't have known had I not, contacted my own anxiety or my own pain related to the traumas that I've been through. Right. And a natural sort of follow off from that is that the kind of the second area that Tedeschi and Calhoun talked about is, our relationships with other people typically change. Right. So relationships that maybe, weren't as positive for us or as motivating. We may have less willingness to put effort into those things. We may have much greater sort of value or appreciation for those who are close to us. I was actually just talking with somebody this morning about how he's gone through quite a bit of trauma in the past couple of years, including the deaths of some loved ones. And, through the loss of that and the trauma surrounding that, he really has this different awareness of, I know what's important to me now, and it's my children and my spouse, and like that's where I want to put my focus, right? So, it's not that we don't know that before we go through traumas, but oftentimes that can be really, really heightened. It's like, the whole sort of like life is short, and you got to really prioritize what matters, right? Like that's a common sort of sign of post-traumatic growth occurring.
Yeah, okay? That totally makes sense, because for me, what I kind of liken it to is, I thought, like before my diagnosis and, years and years ago, I thought I was doing a really good job with my home life. Like I thought I was number one husband. I was awesome, great dad. I thought I was killing it.
Yeah.
And then you realize, after you become aware that you're sick and that something's wrong, you're sick or, or injured, however you want to say it.
Yeah.
Then you look back and you go, holy fuck, I was horrible. I was like, all those times when my wife was telling me that either, I wasn't acting appropriately or I wasn't engaged or present, and I thought, she's just quote unquote nagging me and she needs to leave me alone. She was actually bang on, and I was disengaged, not present. There were important family events, like with my daughter, that my wife would tell me about now, and I was there.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, I have no recollection of that whatsoever.
Yeah.
And it makes you feel horrible, and all of a sudden it just dawns on you.
Yeah.
That you just weren't aware. Like you thought you were doing well.
Yeah.
Really, you were just surviving in between your shifts. doing the minimum that you needed to, saying hello, making sure no one's bleeding, and then going to sleep or eating. That was it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you can really sort of, if we actually stop and pause as we're doing right now and talk about this, like, you can kind of get it. Like, you and I were talking last time a bit about how, like, one of the mechanisms through which people can heal and recover from an injury like PTSD is they have to connect with their own vulnerability, right? Their grief and feelings of loss and the pain and the horror and all of those things, right? And until people can really connect and engage with those things, it's really hard for them to work through what they need to work through in order to facilitate greater recovery and reduction of symptoms and all those things. And you can sort of see how, somebody on the front end of this injury who's really disconnected from their feelings, that's going to have a cost to the ways that they are able to connect with the people around them that they care about. And I agree with you. Like, there's this thought pattern at that front end going, I need to keep this to myself. I need to keep this on lockdown. I've got to be strong. And this whole myth about what strength means, right? But the cost of that is that typically, until that person's able to start doing some of that connecting work, the people around them do feel like you're not with me, or I'm not with you.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And so, it's always a really positive sign to me when I see people start to talk about, like the soft moments they can have with their spouses, or the willingness that they're starting to feel of, getting down on the ground and playing with their kids or doing stuff like that. Like that, that's post-traumatic growth in action, right? Because it is really like taking off the suit of armor or putting the shield down, and, there's a risk to that, right? Because, then you're more, you could potentially be hurt, but there's also the ability to hug and get close to and actually contact when you're not, covered in that suit of armor.
Yeah, there comes a point where you just got to say, like, enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Enough of putting on, like you said, putting on this armor every day.
Yeah.
When you realize that that's actually hurting you more than it's helping you.
Well, that's right. And it's without, as we know, it's without judgment, right? You're doing what you know to do, but there's this whole thing that can be released, right? Like, I like the idea of the suit of armor because, geez, like, just imagine what it feels like to take that thing off and actually be able to move your limbs and stretch out. And, like, there's a whole different ability to feel things if you're not so locked down, right? And scary as that can be, that can also be tremendously liberating. And frankly, that's where I see people really starting to heal, right? Is when they can actually start to contact things in this true sort of authentic kind of fashion. And most certainly that involves other people, right? Like, we do not heal in isolation. We need each other, right?
Right. Yeah. We are a tribe.
We are a tribe. That's right.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think, what are some of the barriers that people encounter when trying to achieve post-traumatic growth? What are some things that stand in the way, whether it be from the victim's point of view or the person that's struggling point of view, as far as maybe they put up their own barriers or their attitudes, or what are some things like that?
Yeah, I think this whole thing about stigma, whether that's self-stigma or whether that's stigma coming from externally, right? Like, if I have a narrative that I run by that says, I can't show that, I can't feel that, I can't let people know this about me, like sort of rules, right, that are kind of constricting, that is a barrier, right? Because one of the things we need to have happen for somebody to sort of facilitate the process of maybe getting to that post-traumatic growth place is a process of productive rumination, right? And they have to be able and willing to engage and think about and chew on. And when my dissertation research really highlighted, we need social connection as part of that process of productive rumination. So if I'm living by rules that say I can only show this or I can only show that, or this is acceptable or this isn't, right, I'm going to block myself from being able to really do some of that working through, right?
What does rumination mean?
Just like sort of rumination, we use that word. It's like, cows have multiple stomachs, right? And because they're ruminants, they take in stuff and it goes over and over again. That's kind of what we do in our minds, is like, if you've ever had a thought or an idea that you've turned over and over and over again, you're ruminating, right? And there can be rumination that's kind of obsessive, where we're just going round and round like a tire in the mud that's not getting free.
That's what I do. That's what
I do a lot of that myself.
Yeah. Okay.
Or the hope would be that there's something about, turning that thought over that's actually helping us to come up with a solution to the problem or a way forward or a plan or a new perspective. And that's what we want to see happen as people are working through traumas, is that they're not just stuck in, I failed, or I should be ashamed of myself, or, I've been betrayed, or whatever. We want to see them be able to, ruminate on that, engage in that, but also be able to come to someplace different with it. Right. And again, and a lot of the first responders I work with, they come with some pretty, pretty unconscious but well developed beliefs about what's okay and what's not okay. Right. And that is that's a predictive variable, in my opinion, to what can lead people to the injury in the first place. But it's also something that needs to be addressed in order to help people facilitate the healing that we want them to be able to achieve.
Yeah.
Right. And then, that's the internal processes, right? That's the things that happen inside of ourselves and our minds and our bodies. And then sometimes that bumps up against what's happening in the external world, right? So if you have a spouse, and I've certainly seen this happen, where it's like, I don't know how to deal with you and all of your feelings. Like, I'm used to having that tough guy, right? So if you're bumping up against messages like that, that can be kind of shaming, right? And sometimes that can lead people to go, oh, well, this was wrong. I shouldn't do this, or I need to go back to the way it was before, right? Versus the relationship being able to, sort of be modified and change according to what's happened, right? Wow,
you just hit me with that. So I experienced that personally, because, of course, before the moment that I became aware I was injured and everything sort of fell apart, I was this sort of quote-unquote strong guy. I didn't really emotionally waver too much. I looked the same whether I was in chaos or not. I hardly ever cried. Like, I even remember when I was young not being able to cry, like being at events and telling myself, man, this is like a really emotionally sad, whether it be a funeral or this is like an emotionally sad event, and I can't bring myself to cry at all. Like, I remember, feeling that way. And obviously at home, I'm trying to be that sort of rock. And then afterwards, after the injury, and I become aware, now I can cry at the drop of a hat.
Right.
And I feel bad sometimes because my wife sees me cry, in my eyes, way too much.
Yeah.
And that is probably quite shocking to her, or maybe uncomfortable. Like, I don't know if she really even knows how to take that.
Have you ever asked?
No, and then when you start talking with it, I'm like, yeah, because I can see it happening, and I do talk to her a lot about how I'm feeling, and the fact that a lot of times I can't really control it. If I'm crying, don't worry about it. A lot of times I can't control it.
Yeah.
It just sort of, something just overwhelms me and I cry for some reason, but just roll with it. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a really important point, I think, because I think that happens. I could imagine that happens a lot in couples.
Absolutely. It's interesting timing that we're doing this today, because I just came back last week. I was out in BC running the Couples Overcoming PTSD Everyday program, the COPE program.
Right.
And this is what we talk about, right? How, there's also the sort of occupational stigmas, or the historical Stoic service culture that says, you're not supposed to show or feel any vulnerability, right? And it's so interesting to sort of bring this idea into couples work of saying, like, what if that was a myth that you sort of bought and believed for very understandable reasons, but what if it was a myth? Like, what if it's not based on what's true and factual to help you be healthy and to help your relationship be healthy, right? And so what if you tried to do more things about not just being expressive, but really checking in with each other about what that expression means and how it's being interpreted. And, if you haven't asked your wife, it might be interesting too, because you never know. Like, she might say, no, it's actually helped me to feel closer to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. I don't want to speak for her, but that sometimes is what we hear from couples in particular, is like, when I see this man that I've known to be, super strong and stoic start to open up and show his feelings, like, I feel closer to him. Like, we probably heard that 20 times last week,
Right.
And it makes sense again, right? Like, if we're thinking from the standpoint of like, it's hard to hug a rock. You're not going to be close to a rock, right? You're going to use it to like break something, but you're not going to expect anything in return from it.
Yeah.
that there's maybe a different thing to consider here. And, if we're talking about post-traumatic growth as we are, that's just such a key piece, right? Like, and the understanding that, we have to be embedded in our social world as part of our healing process, right? Like, this isn't something you can go off to an island and do by yourself. We need to have this engagement back and forth to be able to facilitate that productive rumination I was talking about, and to be able to develop those new perspectives about ourselves and how we should or should not be, and, what the meaning of that is in our families and things like that, right? Like, we have to have each other to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I have some opinions on these barriers. So
yeah,
I feel like a lot of people, and maybe I was like this too at one point, I feel like a lot of people, and I don't know why, maybe you can shed some light on it, but they put up their own barriers to post-traumatic growth. It's like, I don't have any better way to say this. This is going to sound horrible, and I know this already. So
yeah,
it's almost from the outside looking in. It's like some people like to remain in the chaos.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to. It sounds really harsh to say people don't want to get better,
mm-hmm.
but I don't know how else to say it, because I've met people.
Yeah.
And I know everybody's different and everybody has different, paths to get better. But when I hear someone saying, and this is not a real one, just an example, I've had PTSD for 10 years. I've had, let's say, 8 different psychologists, done every kind of therapy out there, and I am no better.
Yeah.
When I hear that, I'm like, what? What is... There's something wrong. Like, there's something wrong either. And for the most part, when I hear that story, I'm like, you are the problem.
Yeah.
You are standing in your own way.
Yeah.
So, something's happening, and you're not opening up or leaning in. And that's a tricky thing to say. And I know that because we're sick. So I'm expecting a sick person or an injured person to react like someone who's not sick or injured. So I know that can be kind of, I know how that sounds.
Yeah, and I appreciate the qualifiers, but I mean, I sometimes think that, there's a reality to folks with PTSD. Like, even just if we think neurobiologically, like the nervous system is encouraging chaos, right? Because, when people are keyed up or they're dysregulated, like, having that manifest in their lives actually starts to become familiar in a strange kind of a way. And so then you pair that with how scary and hard true change can be, right? Especially if we don't know what it's going to look like on the other side.
Right.
And people, it's kind of like the devil you know or the devil you don't, even if this is chaotic and not a whole lot of fun.
That makes sense. That makes some sense.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, especially with social media, like, social media has added another whole layer to this, saying it mildly. So, in this community that I'm a part of, you'll see people all the time.
Yeah.
And it tends to be the same people. They'll go on social media, let's say Facebook. They'll go on Facebook. They'll put on this vague post of, worst day ever, don't know what I'm going to do,
yeah,
can't handle it, ...
Yeah.
Okay? And they say nothing else. So then, of course, it's because we are all caregivers, especially in the first responder community, they get this flood of comments, of supportful comments, and, all this thing. And I'm wondering how much of an addiction that is, because, you know what I mean? You can just put out a message anytime you want.
Yeah.
You get all these supportive comments.
Yeah.
And if you get better, if you actually get better and move on,
that goes away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how much of a factor is that?
I think it's a very significant factor, because that's powerfully reinforcing. I mean, I tend to look at that as, okay, so this is the way that this person knows right now to communicate what they need, right? Is in this public forum in this way. And it is powerfully reinforcing, right? Because, all those messages of support and concern and all these things, they come flooding in. But we're funny creatures in this way, right? Because if I do that tonight, and then I do it tomorrow night, and then I do it maybe a week from now, and then I do it 2 weeks from now, a lot of the people in my life are going to start to tire of that. Like the ones who really want me to get better, who are invested in my health, they're going to start to get tired of that and go, well, Megs, what are you doing about it, right? Like, are you talking to someone? Are you taking your meds? Are you going to the gym? Are you doing yoga? Are you sleeping? Could you cut down on caffeine? You know what I mean? Like, we are all going to be inclined to get into that, the righting reflex, right?
Right.
And so, that always is a bit of a worry for me, because if that person is stuck at, this is the level of communication that they have, and that's inevitably going to burn people out if that's the only mechanism that they have, right? What then starts to happen to the quality of the social relationships they do have, right? And so then you start to see this, the people who end up connected are those who only have that level of interpersonal skill about communicating their needs, right? And so it's almost like the folie à deux, we call it sometimes, where it's like, two people can actually be reinforcing of their own distortions because they share them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, social media is a great vehicle in the sense of, we can do these things immediately and we can do them publicly, and they can rally all of these resources around us, but to a point, right? And, I think it's always, it's helpful sometimes to think about these psychological principles in physical ways, right? Like if I go to the gym with a trainer once a week for an hour, and then I'm going back and getting mad at the trainer for the fact that I'm not losing weight, let's say, and he or she says, well, how many times go to the, you know what I mean? Of course, we all get that. Like if I go to the gym and stand beside the machines but don't actually use them, I'm not likely going to see a lot of change, right?
Exactly, and that's the same as us. I'll use me for example. I'll use me. That's the same as me going to my psychologist once a week or however many times a week for however long.
Yeah.
And thinking that I'm done. Okay, that's good. I put my work in. I've done no work. And if I don't do the things that my psychologist asks me to do, if I don't put the work in, just going to see my psychologist every week is not going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And I think a lot of people fall in that trap. Like, oh, I've been with my psychologist for a year and they've done nothing. I am no better. Time for a new psychologist.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is, because it's really important to connect with your psychologist or whoever you're going to get help. That's very important.
Yeah.
However, if it becomes a pattern, like I say, then the problem might not be with the person that you're going to see.
That's right. And, I typically, like, maybe I'm not this explicit, but like, I like to think about this as, people's paths to recovery and healing are like trees, right? And if we only have one branch on the tree, it's not going to look very full. It's not going to look a whole lot like a tree. But if we have multiple branches, we're going to see more of the lushness that we want to see. And I think PTSD is a serious injury, right? And I think about recovery has to be taken that seriously and that comprehensively. So going to see your psychologist and doing trauma-focused work, that's one piece of it. But then we are looking at all those behavioral skills, right? Like, are you meditating? Are you getting some fresh air? Are you working on sleeping? Are you managing your caffeine? If you need medications, are you taking them? Are you taking them the way you're supposed to? Are you working on being assertive in your communication? Not that you have to be perfect in that, but are you working on it? Are you journaling? Are you working to try to learn about your automatic thoughts? Are you putting that into practice? You know what I mean? Like, and that's the tree of recovery that we're talking about. And if somebody comes in and sees me and we're working for a while and they're coming in every week and saying, okay, I'm doing this, and this, but my symptoms aren't reducing, that's really good data for me to say, okay, we got to do something else here. We got to change this up. Like, what do we need to look at? If someone's coming in and they're not doing those things, I'm a little bit more limited in terms of being able to say, is it the treatment or is it that we need to be trying to do more of these things between sessions, right?
Yeah, the problem with that, though, is that that's hard work.
Yep.
Right? So, and I'll use myself as an example. For years now, the pattern with me has been best of intentions. Sure. I know the work that needs to be done, and I know how to do it.
Yeah.
However, I will come up with every excuse in the book to not do the work. Yeah. Or to give myself a break, saying, you know what, you've been a good boy. Yeah. You don't have to do the hard work right now. Yeah. You can do it tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes.
You got it. That's right.
what is the key thing you think to make that between people that embrace the hard work, embrace getting to growth, and people that consistently avoid it?
Yeah, I would say, and this is my own experience, I guess. I would say that if people have a good working understanding of what really matters to them, so if they have a good working understanding of what it means to them to live a values-based life, right? Like, I know the few things or 5 things or whatever that really make me tick, right? Then those can become sort of leverages for motivation in a way, So, okay, in this moment, I don't feel like doing my journaling or my meditation or going to the gym or whatever the case might be. But if I'm connecting my doing this or not doing this to something that really matters to me, like a strong relationship with my spouse, then, that may be the thing that gives me that little propulsion to get doing the thing. And, we tend to think about change as this very black and white thing, and it's not, right? Like, we go through there's Prochaska and DiClemente proposed this, 40 years ago, that there's these stages of change, and we need to use the things that matter to us as the mobilizing factors that move us into actually taking action towards the change we need to make, right? But if we're just sort of saying, well, do it, but not putting that level of consideration into why are we doing it, then we're probably going to stumble, right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, what I've had to do, and I've done some good work on this lately for myself, but I need to always keep in mind that even though I've come a long way and I've healed a lot of stuff, I've reprocessed traumatic memories, they don't bother me anymore, but I still am left with these underlying symptoms that I still go through, whether it be some social anxiety, stuff like that, some depression. So knowing that my brain has a tendency to do that, being aware of that, what I try to do now is interrogate my brain at every point. I don't believe a word that my brain tells me from the get-go. Yeah. So when I hear this, when I start telling myself, it could be negative thoughts. So that if my brain starts telling me, hey, you're not doing good enough. You're just not good enough. You shouldn't be doing a podcast. Like, who are you to be doing a podcast about this? Like, these are all thoughts that go through my brain. Or maybe the thought of, you don't have to do yoga today. You don't have to meditate today. You did it yesterday. Yeah. When I start hearing those things, I stop, and I actually have a conversation with myself internally, and I tell myself to shut up. And when I do that, when I call my brain's bluff, when I do that, that's when I end up doing the thing that I should be doing anyway.
Yeah, totally.
But there are still times where I buy into it and like, yeah, you know what, you're right, I'm good. I don't need to do that today. And I'm okay with that. That still happens. It happens a lot less than it did. Yeah. But you need it's kind of this double-edged sword with emotions. You need to take the emotions out of it, because I make a lot of decisions on all of my bad decisions are all based on emotion. Yeah. Right? Whether it's eating, like big thing with me be like eating late at night, or eating when I'm sad, or anything like that. So they're all emotion-based. Or spending money. Like I'll go have I don't do this anymore, but big impulse purchases. Yeah. Right? That make me feel good for 10 minutes.
Get some dopamine for sure.
Right. So trying to separate, as far as decision-making goes, trying to put a wall between decisions and emotions.
Yeah. Absolutely. And there's an idea of opposite action, right? Like the thing actually, when we're feeling depressed or socially anxious or whatever, when we're feeling those things, the thing we actually need to do is go engage, right? Right. If you're depressed and your mind is saying, no, just you're not feeling well, you're tired, you don't have any energy, just go lay down, right? Like the thing we need to do is get our shoes on and go outside, right? And, I tend to run a little bit on the anxious end of the spectrum, and I've really had to learn in my life. I have to sometimes just move myself towards what matters towards me, like my values. And that means a lot of times picking up my anxiety and taking it with me. Right. Right. Because I can't, if I let my anxiety drive the bus, I would never do anything, right? I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you, that's for sure, right? but there's a value here that I think we're saying that we both share about, like, we want to connect and we want to help people maybe hear a different message and things like that. So like we've got this connected to something that matters to us. And so it's worth, whatever our minds might try to be convincing us is true when it's probably not, right?
Totally. The next question I have for you.
Yeah.
When in the healing process, so you realize something's wrong, you get hooked up with a psychologist or psychiatrist or social worker, whoever's going to help you through this initially.
Yeah.
You get hooked up with them. At what point in the process should post-traumatic growth be brought into the conversation?
Sure. I mean, frankly, I try to bring that conversation into talks with new folks pretty early on because for a couple of reasons. One of the things that I really love about the way Tedeschi and Calhoun have framed this is that you don't have to be through suffering in order to experience growth, right? Like you can be experiencing these change factors and these growth factors even if you still continue to experience pain, right? And I also
that's cool. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, right? Like that's a hopeful message. Like we can experience growth while we still have things to resolve. And I see that all the time. I also think, like, on the front end of treatment, I'm talking with people a lot about this is what's happened to your brain and this is why we call this an injury and, this is how this is showing up and the kind of symptoms that you're talking about, they all sort of hang together. And that can sometimes be overwhelming and sometimes can be a bit defeating. And so I really like to say, like, we also have this awareness that people can get to this different and new place in their life that they couldn't have gotten to without going through this process. So there's a bit of hope embedded in that. And so, I try to bring that in early on, right? And sometimes I'm encouraging people, it's a leap of faith, or, I'm gonna know this for us for a while until you start to see it in action in your life. Because people do oftentimes come to see me on the front end feeling very out of control and anxious and not believing that could be the case. So I try to bring that in right away, right? And really talking about, these are the kinds of things that seem to help us, right? Like telling ourselves the same story over and over again about how awful we are and how much we failed, right?
Yeah.
Like I can appreciate how, to your point, like the emotions can sort of drive us there, but that's where we try to open up space to consider, is there any other way that we can look at this thing? Is there any other way? And that idea of like, what would you say to a friend if you were talking to him or her? That's where that comes from, right? Is we're trying to sort of shift up the stickiness of those really unhelpful ways of considering oftentimes what are very out of control circumstances that occur. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Like some of the things like that I try to do internally with me, other than those conversations, like I said, where I tell my brain to shut up, but I try to, because I can be really quick to think negative about stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that comes from, I think, when a lot of first responders, I think, they can understand this. We tend to be really cynical. We tend to have really sarcastic, really dark humor, and these are all defense mechanisms to get us through our day.
Yeah, totally.
And however, in our personal lives, none of those things help you out.
No.
Our spouses don't really enjoy that. They don't. It doesn't work in a relationship for the most part. Yeah. And so, I can start to have negative thoughts really quickly, and. Like let's take this. I'll take the podcast for an example. Sometimes I'll have an interview, not with you, obviously. But I'll have an interview, and I'll think to myself like an hour beforehand, I so do not want to do this.
Yeah.
Which isn't true. My brain's giving me bad information.
Yeah.
But it's like I don't want to do this. Who am I to talk to this person? And what I do is I stop myself, and I've changed the words to. I get to do this.
Yeah, yeah.
I get to do this. I get to talk to this person. Like, this is what I do. Like, just trying to reshape that, that mindset, which is hard work. Like, that comes back to this. Like, this is not easy to do.
No.
It's all hard work, and there's no shortcuts.
Yeah. And it's a roadmap to living, right?
For sure.
Yeah. And And I agree with you. Like, the piece of that you're talking about in some ways is that you have to be aware that you're doing it in the first place, right? And then, so if we can pause long enough and give ourselves the grace of being willing to tune in, right? Then we can start to become aware of the things and quite frankly, the very limiting beliefs that stop us from doing things that might give us a different experience of the world or of other people or of ourselves, right? Yeah. And then if we can realize what we're saying, or we can even play that tape out to the end, or, consider like, what am I really thinking could happen here? We find out that, the probability of that is actually quite low. Right. And even if, even Sean, if you and I are sitting here and all of a sudden, silence, we have nothing else to say, odds are good that the sun's going to come up tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like really and I think that's one of the things that happens so much with folks with PTSD is that there is this true sort of change of attention that happens. And so people with PTSD are much more inclined to see the negative. We all are, frankly, as human beings, but then you add PTSD and that injury on, and that sort of negativity bias becomes really, really profound. And so like loosening that up has to start with being aware of, what are we thinking or telling ourselves could happen in the first place, right? And that is certainly where we start to see some of these growth factors take hold, right? Because when you can realize that maybe, I had a woman I worked with a number of years ago who had experienced quite a bit of sexual trauma, and for her, all men were just dangerous and sort of evil, right? And when she actually stopped to look around her world at the men in her life, she realized she has sons, she realized she has neighbors, and she was actually, she was able to kind of like loosen up the rigidity of that belief and realize that no, like her experience says that those men who harmed her and other men in certain circumstances could be, but that's not the case for everyone, and then she was able to start doing things differently in her life because she wasn't so ruled by that really unfair perspective. And then, one of the growth factors that we haven't talked about is like people recovering from PTSD who start to show post-traumatic growth. Like there's this real sense of, man, if I got through this, I can get through anything, and there's a confidence and a competence that starts to return when people can actually put the work in of figuring out for themselves that life does not only have to be the way it is right now. And I actually have some agency. I can have some mastery over my own experience.
Yeah, I haven't personally gotten there yet. I'm on the way there, but
okay.
I can totally see how actually in the end you end up being more invincible than you thought you were when you weren't.
Yeah, and to me, it's about a balanced perspective. Like none of us are invincible, so I don't want to get there. But I want to be able to have the sense of, if more adversity turns up in my life, I have an idea about what to do with it. Like
you know what? A better word. I'll be more resilient today.
Yeah.
When I get there than I thought I was when I wasn't resilient at all, and I was just surviving.
That's right. That's right. And I can learn that on the back of work that I put in, and then I can start to learn some things. Like, you want to talk about a powerful reinforcer, start to get somebody with PTSD challenging some of the myths or the really unhelpful beliefs they've been living with, and have some new experiences start to develop, and that becomes this positive momentum like this. I sometimes think about it as a snowball going uphill. You know what I mean? Like, right. We can learn some things, and you start, like I start to see people's, like the color returns to their face. They start to do things spontaneously that we haven't even talked about them doing, because they're really grasping this idea of like, I actually can do a lot more than I was giving myself credit for.
Yeah, you know what it is? It's confidence.
Yeah.
So what you're seeing is confidence, because when this happened to me, I wasn't. Are you okay?
Yeah.
You're still getting over this illness, aren't you?
Yeah, I've had this cold for a long time. Anyway, sorry.
That's okay. That's all right. So what I found that what happened to me when I wasn't able to work as a paramedic anymore.
Yeah.
All my confidence is gone. So I went from a guy who could easily organize a multiple agency mass casualty incident, and I have and did.
Yeah.
Easy, like done.
Yeah.
And well, to a guy who couldn't get through a grocery list.
Yeah.
Please don't ask me to cook anything. And I used to love to cook. Don't ask me to put together a meal. Just mundane, easy things I could no longer do because all my confidence was gone.
Yeah.
And now what's happening, like I'll give you an example. So I obviously work away from home. So my family's in Nova Scotia. I work in Alberta. And so I have my place here, and I have to do some stuff for myself. And the biggest thing for me has been meal prep.
Yeah.
So getting back into cooking and organizing meals for 7 days, putting together a grocery list, sticking to a budget. These are things that now I can do, and I do them successfully when a year ago, maybe even more recent than that, I would not have been able to do this, or I would have thought I was not able to do this.
Yeah.
Right?
And if you thought that you couldn't and felt like, this is sort of hopeless and I'll never be able to do it again, I mean, what's the likely outcome of that? You're not going to do it, and then it reinforces this incompetency, right?
Right, because Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or think you can't,
That's right.
Either way you're right.
That's right. And so sometimes, one of the things that, certainly I work on in treatment with people is, can we try to create some experiments so that you can test out this hypothesis you have about yourself,
right,
and see if it actually stands up to scrutiny, because more often than not, it doesn't. Right. And, we're not asking about doing, everything all at once. And there's a funny thing, right? Like there's a thing that starts to happen where people do have to sometimes confront things are different now, right? Like I am different in ways. And there's sometimes is grief and loss that has to be experienced related to the changes that have happened. But this is where the post-traumatic growth can come in, right? Like, right. Yes, those changes have happened, and that is true. And we have to allow time and space for you to feel that and work through that. And there are also things that you now know about yourself and life and other people and the future that you did not know beforehand. If we can start to spread the distance from the limiting beliefs to these new understandings, right, that's where people start to thrive again. Absolutely.
If I keep in mind that mental illness, mental health, PTSD, it's a human problem. It's not just a first responder problem.
That's right. You
have to always keep that in mind. Now I'm going to bring it into the first responder world, because most, if not all, of successful first responders are type A personalities.
Yeah.
This fall is devastating. It's more devastating because we're used to being type A. We take charge, we fix, we can do anything because that's what led us into doing this. So when this happens, you lose all your confidence. I feel it's especially devastating to a type A personality.
Yeah.
But the reverse to that is, if you can find a way through post-traumatic growth, to inject some confidence back in, then, like you said, the momentum starts, and then you can move mountains again.
Completely. And if you look at some of the literature on post-traumatic growth, sometimes you'll see this imagery of, sort of resilience is like when the wind blows in and the tree bends over, it kind of bends over, but it snaps back. Whereas post-traumatic growth would say that wind blows in and it actually does break the tree. But seeds from the tree sort of spread and they land, and then they plant and they grow, and something new emerges. Right. And
that likens, we were talking a little bit about social media posts and memes and stuff. So one of the phrases I don't like, and this is only me personally, so for anybody out there who gets offended by what I'm about to say, it's okay. But one of the things that bugs me is when people say PTSD is a sign of strength. And I look at that and I look, because remember, I'm diagnosed with it, so I'm talking about myself. PTSD is not any more a sign of strength as it is a sign of weakness.
Right.
It's just a thing.
It just is.
It is.
Yeah.
And you and a person who gets PTSD, that's not an indicator of how weak or how strong they are at all. However, post-traumatic growth, how you get back up, that is a sign of strength.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And, when I think about the people that I know living with PTSD, and particularly people who are still symptomatic, I sometimes think to myself, man, like the strength it takes to live with a condition like that is pretty significant, right? So, but I agree with you, and that's something that is a guiding principle for me in my life, both professionally and personally, is that it is not about avoiding adversity. It's not about avoiding challenges or even sometimes traumas. Those are going to happen. That's part of life. right? But it is about, what do I do on the other end of things? How do I mobilize what I need, my resources, internal or external, to figure out how I pick myself back up? And it's okay if the getting back up process isn't pretty. I mean, heavens.
Yeah, it's not pretty. I think in order for it to work, if it's pretty, that means you're not doing it right.
That's right. And so, like, tolerance for the mess, you know?
Yeah, because I mean, this goes back to the whole hard work thing. Especially with social media, people like to be told things that make them feel better.
Yeah.
And that's what they like to buy into. Like PTSD, you are strong. It's a sign of how strong you are, which is totally, in my opinion. However, people hear that, and mostly it's I'm going to say, and I am still a little bit one of these people, and was totally one of these people. The people that are not putting in the work, are not doing the hard work, are the people in general, I believe, that cling to these phrases of you don't have to do any more work because you're such a strong person because you got PTSD.
Yeah.
So you're good. Don't worry about it. Sit back because life is hard already.
Yeah.
And it's okay, and you're here. When it's just coddling, it's just like a warm hug. However, that warm hug is suffocating us.
Yeah.
And we're not even seeing it.
Yeah.
And it's harsh. You have to be really harsh with yourself. And just so people know, I'm as harsh with myself as I am sounding to other people. You have to get up. You can't, there's no excuses. I've made horrible choices.
Yeah.
I've made horrible, I've said horrible words. I've done horrible things.
Yeah.
To my family, to the people that I love the most, because I was sick. However, being sick is not an excuse. I still have to be accountable for the things that I did while I was sick.
Sure.
However, the being sick is just it's a factor. It's I don't know what the good word for it is. Hopefully you probably have one. It's not an excuse, but it is something. The fact that you were sick is something. It's not nothing.
It's a variable for sure. And
right.
Well, guess what? I've done and said horrible things to my family members and loved ones too, and I don't have PTSD. None of us gets through life without being an asshole at points in time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, for sure.
And I do think for the people who are out there who are on social media posting those things, they're trying to find their own tribe, right? They're desperate. I believe they're desperate for connection, and they don't know, or they're not ready yet. Right? They're sort of on the ice trying to figure out, how do I get up, and maybe if I talk to other people who are sitting down here, right?
Yeah.
But you just never know, right? I mean, the process of change is so idiosyncratic. And, it's funny, I heard this thing, and actually it was Oprah who said it last year or something, and I just loved it. It was in a lot of times, none of us are responsible for the things that have happened to bring us to this point, but we are all 100% responsible for what we do with it moving forward. And that really struck me, because I was people who have gone through the kinds of traumas that maybe you've gone through, or other people out there, they're not your fault, right? If you had known that these things were going to happen, I suspect very strongly that you would have avoided going to that thing or having that happen to you. But it was out of your control, right? But when there's almost a freedom that can come when we realize that we can take responsibility over ourselves now, right? I think there's a true freedom in being able to then, create and guide the life that we want to have for ourselves, even if we have scars or signs that we've been through a battle.
Absolutely. I mean, to people that are listening to this, and the people that know me, that I love you. I love the people that are struggling and are in the trenches, or even the people that aren't struggling yet but are trying to educate themselves. I love you. But that doesn't mean that I will not tell you to put down your bullshit.
Yeah, totally.
Make sure that the things that you're struggling with are actual struggles and not just bullshit that you're putting in your way.
Well, and we talk about this, I talk about this with my colleagues, and I will, if somebody's working, I will go to the ends of the earth to try to figure out how to help them. But I'm not going to work harder than you to take agency over your life. You know what I mean?
Oh, I like that. Yeah. Yeah.
So, if there are problems, if there are challenges, if there are barriers, all day long, we can talk those through and figure out what to do differently. right? But I'm not going to be responsible for your life. And this is something that I reflect to people all the time. Like, if I'm offering you ideas and you're yes butting me, then guess what's going to happen? I'm going to stop giving you ideas, because what's the point, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that's not with a lack of compassion, and that's not with a lack of understanding about how hard the process can be. It's just saying, like, I need you to show up, and I will show up too.
Right. For me, it's my ultimate way of showing that I love you.
Yeah, that's right.
Is by trying to save you from yourself, by saying the things to you that no one else in your life apparently is willing to say to you.
Yeah.
Like,
or maybe you're somebody that they're prepared to listen to,
Yeah, maybe.
Right?
I mean, yeah, for sure. So, what are some of the questions I have here? Teresa, prep me.
Oh, yeah.
So, all right. You touched on a little bit. You touched on one at least. What are some studies that people can search for and read about post-traumatic growth that you know of?
Well, so I would definitely start at the now let me see here. It's the post-traumatic growth at University of North Carolina in Charlotte. So if people were to actually just Google that would take them to their webpage. And I would start with them because, they're the folks who coined the term. They're the ones who are doing the research, and they've got all of the publications and everything about post-traumatic growth on their website. Mm-hmm. So I would start there, and it's got a whole raft of books and articles and, things that you can kind of tune into to find out, what's the conversation about this idea of post-traumatic growth. That's where I would start.
Perfect. Okay.
The Post-Traumatic Growth Research Group. That's what it's called.
Oh, cool. Right on. Another question I have is this. Why do you think that, or maybe we are and I'm just not seeing it, but why do you think we're not talking about post-traumatic growth any more than we are? And wouldn't talking about post-traumatic growth more, sort of shifting away from post-traumatic stress disorder, if you want to shift away from that, and focusing on post-traumatic growth, wouldn't that give people more hope?
Certainly. And so I think these things are both and, Sean, honestly. Like, I think part of where we're at is if we look at, if we just look at how long human beings have been on this earth, right, compared to how long
blink of an eye.
We're talking about post-traumatic stress disorder, right? We're talking about a moment in time that we've actually been naming this thing and normalizing it and destigmatizing it and whatever else, right? So it's kind of like we can't move away from something until we've really given it its due. And so I would like to see the conversation shift to a both and, right? So let's keep talking about operational stress and the impact, on first responders. And let's talk about trauma and, the human condition and suffering and emotions. Like, let's keep talking about that. And let's embed in that conversation that this is not all a doomsday story. In fact, like, the thing that I love about this work is that we have this profound internal biological drive to heal ourselves. And that needs to be part of the conversation. So let's not get rid of the one for the other. Let's talk about both.
Right.
Because
I guess that'd be the more important thing. If you're going to talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, make sure you also have a good helping of post-traumatic growth.
That's right. And if you're somebody out there who's listening to this and you're just in the struggle and the suffering right now, that's also okay. That's part of the change process. And to your point, the words you've been using, but leaning into that and being willing to experience it, that's part of what facilitates growth to happen, right? So, through the suffering can emerge the beauty.
Yeah, for sure. What do you, what else I got here? Just looking through to think if I have any other questions for you about this.
Yeah.
You know what? Not right now. Something might come to me, but here's what I'm going to ask you.
Yeah.
So we touched on this before in the last episode because in your line of work, obviously you're dealing with everybody else's worst stuff every day.
Yep.
And that cannot not affect you.
Yep.
Okay. So in keeping with this whole owning your growth theme this year.
Yeah.
What are some things that you do, knowing this, how harmful your job could be to you? Mm-hmm. What are some things that you do to own your growth or to maintain your wellness, specifically that you do for that reason?
Yeah. Well, I guess in keeping with the theme of what we've been talking about today, I don't expect anybody to do it for me. Right. So, I mean, I've had to take some hard looks in the mirror over the last number of years myself and go, where's this coming from? And, can you keep doing this in a way that's going to help you to be able to show up the way that you want to for the people who are, coming to you for help. Right. So I have to maintain a rigorous self-honesty for sure, about like, am I buying my own bullshit? Right. Which sometimes I do. And sometimes
which we all do too much of.
A friend of mine named Jim Wilson coined that, and I like it quite a lot. But then, you know what, honestly, and I know this is going to it just sounds obvious, I guess, but like I have really, really strong relationships in my life. And I don't talk about the details of the traumas I hear because that's not for everyone. But I talk about what I witness in terms of the human condition. Like I really do, and I talk a lot about what I see people going through in terms of the traumas that they experience and their process of wrestling with that. And there's something about that really helps me, right? Like I find a lot of hope in the struggle. So I've had to learn. I'm not, I'm probably inclined to avoid things myself, and I've really had to learn to sort of challenge that, and really understand that if something is sticking with me, it's, as sometimes things do, that's happening for a reason, right? And so I have to pay my own tribute to that. So part of it has really been coming to understand I can't take this stuff for granted because I do it for a living. In fact, quite the opposite. Like I have to be willing to do what I ask of others to do, right? And live with live with that rigorous honesty about what's my responsibility and what can I take some agency over.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I couldn't do it if I didn't have the people in my life that I have, and that's being able to have conversations like this with you. That's the Teresas of the world, including Teresa herself. That's my partner. That's my family. It's all of these people. It's looking for those opportunities to find connection and similarity versus pushing away, looking only for difference.
Right. What, I'll ask you this last time, but we ask it every time. So if you could give a short message to anybody who's listening that is struggling, and really this whole episode has been a message, but if you could just say one more thing to someone who's listening that may be struggling, what would you say to them?
I would say to them, the struggle is not the thing to fear, right? But make the struggle productive, right? So, if you're going to suffer, at least have it be productive suffering that's going to take you somewhere else. Right? Suffering just for suffering's sake, who wants to get on board with that? So, that the suffering and the pain is not something to shy away from. It's actually trying to teach you something about what matters to you.
Well said. Yeah. Cool. Megan, this has been awesome. I feel like I know more about post-traumatic growth now than I did before, and I probably didn't know, even though I think I have gone through some.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of it as I was going through it, and I really didn't know what post-traumatic growth was or how to quantify it. What are the signs of it to look for to know that you're in it? But this is really the key. I mean, the key to getting better. Yeah. Through this process, the key to getting better is growth, is post-traumatic growth.
That's right. It's growth, period, right? But we're just talking about it in the context of trauma. So, right. And I'm glad, Sean, and I just so appreciate you inviting me back on. And I love this subject. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about it.
Oh, I would say you're probably going to be on lots.
Okay.
Probably going to have topics. If and if ever you have a topic or you think something is poignant.
Yeah.
Enough for that, what's happening in society, that you want to talk about a certain element of this whole circus that we're in.
Yeah.
Just tell me, because we'll do it. But I appreciate you very much. You've taught me a lot, for sure. And I'm positive that anybody who's listening to this is also going to get a lot out of it. So just thank you for taking the time. I hope you feel better soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then of course you had a pipe burst on you in your office building. So I hope that's all taken care of.
Yeah.
But yeah, please. I should ask this actually. Sorry, if someone wants to get a hold of you, if they want to contact you, connect with you, how can they do that?
So probably the best way is through my website. So WGM Psych, so WGMPSYCH.com, and my email's on there. So it's just megan.mcElheran@WGMPsych.com. And I'm always happy to connect with people across the country. I think, we're in this together. So the more we can form those connections, the better.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, Megan, keep taking care of yourself and everybody else that you take care of. I love what you're doing. Please don't stop. Don't change a thing. I know you'll probably be back on soon, and just thank you very much.
Well, Sean, right back at you, because I love what you're doing too, and I think this is such a powerful venue for people to come. So thank you for the work you're doing, and you have a safe trip home tonight.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Looking forward to it. Thanks.
Okay, we'll connect soon.
Okay.
Hey, bye-bye.
Now my shift is finally over. I gotta deal with what's mine.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I have a much better understanding of post-traumatic growth now. Thank you to Dr. Megan McElheran for coming on, taking the time. She was awesome, as usual. You're going to see her again. I already have a subject for our next chat. It's a huge issue with this whole thing that affects almost everybody that I've seen go through it. It's going to be awesome. That's all I'm going to say about that. Also, along with the normal podcast, you're going to see the first UpTalk side chat of the season. For those of you that don't know, a side chat is an extra episode with a guest that's not directly connected to the first responder world. These are important, and here's why. This whole issue of mental illness and PTSD is not just a first responder problem. It's a human problem. And I do these extra episodes. I want to do more of them to help remind us of that. Okay? And the first one is big. Capital B-I-G, big. It's huge. Crazy excited. I'm going to blow your minds. I think. I'm kind of hyping this, but I think it's going to live up to it. That's all I'm going to say about that right now. Again, please check us out at the mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com or anywhere you get your podcasts. Please take a second and leave a comment, leave feedback, give us a rating, and subscribe. However, if you're able to do that, however you listen. It makes a huge, huge, huge difference. I can't tell you enough. So please do that. Hashtag own your growth. Okay, I'm not doing this by myself. You guys are in this with me. So join in. Okay? I want to hear what you're doing. Before I go, I want to say again that this episode is dedicated to the life and career of Chris Siddons, who touched and helped so many people, including myself, just by meeting him once and seeing him speak. My thoughts and support go out to his family and friends, all his loved ones, his extended first responder mental health community, family. It's devastating. And we have so much more work to do, and we're going to do it. And part of that will be continuing the work that Chris started. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other. More love, less judgment.
'Cause we ain't superheroes, we're just ordinary people trying to make a difference and the first on every scene. And it's a heavy, heavy burden to carry all this hurting when you can't unsee the things you've seen. It keeps going on. When those sirens are gone, it keeps going on. When those sirens are gone.